What's going on, CDL fans? Let's talk about the week 2 matches and some of the big storylines for these teams as we head into this long 3-week break. Let's start it off by looking at the standings here. I'm going to be using Breaking Point for everything on this video. Big shout out to Breaking Point. We want to support those guys over there, so check them out for sure. But if we look at the standings right now, we got 3 teams at the top, both with 3-0 records: Heretics, FaZe, and Subliners, followed up closely by OpTic, and then you could see the rest on screen. Rocker, the only team without a win so far in the season, but hopefully they'll get one at some point. But really interesting to see this as it plays out here, because honestly, it's a bit surprising for what we saw in the beginning of the season. Heretics being 3-0 is definitely unexpected. Surge, considering how hot they started week 1, being 2-2 is definitely unexpected. And then, you know, a team like Thieves or Breach down here at 1-3 is also something that we didn't see coming. So definitely interesting to see these. But I want to first talk about the Miami Heretics team, the team number 1 right now in the standings. This team is playing crazy. Now, if we look at their matches, right, they 3-0'd the Royal Ravens, they 3-1'd the Legion, and they 3-1 the Rockers. So they played 3 of probably the bottom 4 teams in the league, but they've only dropped 2 maps, right? They have a 9-2 map count, and the whole team is playing really, really good. I don't know if this overall is really calculating right, because see how it says their record is 6-2. So we'll just go into each game mode individually. If you look at this and try to keep this sort of in the back of your mind as we look at some of the team stats for these teams, look at this hardpoint stats. Look at the damage per 10 minutes. Look at the engagements per 10 minutes. I wonder if maybe I should zoom in here for you all. Look at these numbers, damage and engagements per 10 minutes, right? They all have over 40 engagements per 10 minutes, and they almost all have 4K damage per 10 minutes in hardpoint, which is really, really crazy. When we get into other teams, you'll see just how crazy this is. And SND, I mean, looking at KD-wise, is their worst game mode, I guess you could say, even though they are undefeated on SND. I mean, all just playing really, really good. And then in Control, I mean, the big point here is really just Metals. It's just absolutely frying. He's got a 1.18 and Hardpoint, a 1.36 in Control. This guy right now is a front runner for MVP, or one of the front runners for MVP. And follow me on Twitter when I post my MVP ladder later today, which is Monday. This team honestly just looks really, really good. But let's look at the Seattle Surge next. The team who I said, you know, they started off hot. You know, they went 2-0 in their first week. They beat an LA Thieves team and a Boston Breach team who are underperforming, but are probably looked at in a similar tier as them, or at least were to start the season. And then they got 3-1 by 2 teams in the upper echelon tier by OpTic and FaZe. So definitely kind of solidifying themselves in that middle of the pack range. But let's look at some of these stats. If we look at the hardpoint stats, as you can see here, the damage, no one over 4K, 2 people at 40 plus engagements per 10 minutes. So you're going to start seeing what I mean by this Heretics team. They play at a rapid pace, the entire team, and they all are really, really shooting to start this season. So really playing well. But if you look at the Surge here, right, Illy and Abuza playing pretty good in hardpoint. RCD's not, I mean, honestly, no one's really playing terrible, but definitely not playing up to where they want to be. In SND, it's really only Hook who's struggling in SND. The rest of the team is playing pretty good. So hopefully Hook can turn it around, because he can be a pretty solid SND player. And then when we look at Control, definitely the game mode they're struggling most in. Illy really the only one having, you know, good in Control, I would say. Hook playing probably right about where you'd want him to be at around a 1.0. But RCs and Abuza just not really getting it going in this in the Control game mode. And it'll be interesting to see how this team performs going forwards, because I do think they have the capabilities. But one thing that I've been talking about with this team is I just don't know if they have the slaying power. When you look at RCDs, you look at Illy, neither of those guys you really think as big slayers. Similar thing with Hook and Abuza. Obviously, coming in as a rookie, it's hard to know what to expect from him on a pro level. But I think especially in a game like MW3, you want a guy who can really slay out. And Illy might be able to be that guy this season for them, but it's just definitely not something we've grown to expect from anyone on this team. So we're really going to have to see someone really step up and be super consistent with slaying if they're going to beat teams like OpTic or FaZe. I want to touch on this series, Royal Ravens versus OpTic, that we saw yesterday. Absolute DoorDash challenge, right? Obviously OpTic, nearly 100-point clubbed them in the hard point. Only 2 rounds for Ravens in the Search, and then not even a round in the Control. So if you look at these stats, I mean, look at the balance on the side of OpTic. 45 kills out of Kenny and 46 kills out of the other 3. So just really, really crazy. Kenny putting up the most damage on the team by basically 1,000, right? 900 more than Dashy. The dude is just playing crazy. Dashy is the one soaking up hill time, though. As you can see, 133 seconds of hill time in that map 1 with a 2.3 KD is crazy. And then on the side of Ravens, I mean, Gwyn obviously put up a 1.0. He had the most damage on his team, but overall, the team is really, really struggling. And this is not what I wanted to click on. The Royal Ravens is one team that I really want to talk about here, because I think they are a prime candidate to be possibly one of the first teams to make a roster change. After the 3-0 against OpTic, Clay, if anyone saw the face cams at the end of the series, was absolutely screaming at his teammates. Real literally stood up, knocked his camera over, I think, and left his desk as soon as they lost. So this team, I think, mentally is not doing too great. It's one thing to be 1-3. It's another thing to be 1-3 and super frustrated. So it'll be interesting to see if we do see a team change out of this team. I kind of hope they stick it out to the end of Major 1, but we will have to see. Because obviously, I mean, their only win was a reverse sweep, which is probably one of the best ways to win, but all 3 of their other losses are sweeps. So they literally only have 2 map or 3 map wins on the season. If we look at their stats in hardpoint, Real actually with a 1.09. Clayster somehow with 46 engagements per 10 minutes. The dude is playing at a lightning pace, which is crazy. So I definitely didn't see that coming. And then in SND, it's really only Gwyn who's doing anything. I mean, if you look at KD wise, 0.7s and then a 0.6 out of Real. So SND, they absolutely have to work on. And then when you look at control, same thing. I mean, 0.7s, a 0.8 out of Clay. For me personally, if I'm this team, Godarex and Real have definitely looked like the worst of the 4. Godarex even more specifically. I think maybe you try to bring in someone like Temp on this team to pick up the pace a little bit, because Godarex is playing really, really slow, which you can see by the engagement numbers here. I mean, in all of these, you're going to see his engagement numbers are by far the lowest. So maybe you try to bring in someone like Temp if him and Clay are on good standing, because obviously they played last year together. I don't know how they get along. But Temp could be a good guy to bring in here just to up the slaying numbers to help out Gwyn in that department. But we're going to have to wait and see. Like I said, hopefully they just stick it out through Major 1, and maybe we see them find their footing so they can kind of push forward in the season. They do have 1 win. It's not like they have no wins yet to start the season, so they could figure it out, but it's definitely going to be tough. And then to talk about the OpTic team, which they obviously got 3-0'd by, absolutely destroyed by Coach Rambo, apparently still, according to Breaking Point. They might need to update that. I mean, this OpTic team, they're just like, I don't even know what you could say about this team, right? They lost to New York Subliners in a Game 5 round 11. But then, they 3-1'd a Surge team that was looking hot. And then they 3-0'd a Ravens team who was kind of just, whatever. But they're playing absolutely clinical. If we look at Hardpoint, Shotzzy, the only one with below a 1 KD, which is absolutely fine because he's kind of the guy hitting routes, making plays, sorts of thing. I mean, Kenny is also doing that, to be fair, as well. But when guys are putting up 1.1s, 1.2s, 1.3s, someone's going to have to probably put up below a 1. And I think for that to be Shotzzy is totally okay on this team. And SND, Pred surprisingly has the worst KD, the lowest damage per round. So playing the worst in SND, which is surprising because honestly, Pred is probably a top 5, top 10 SND player in the league for sure, at least in the last 2 years. So this is definitely surprising. But Shotzzy playing crazy at 1.7 is just wild. And then in control, Kenny's the guy going negative, so to speak. But I mean, overall, this team is just playing really, really well. They're all doing well. Somehow, if you look at overall, I don't know if, like I said, if this is updated because the map record is incorrect. Kenny has the most engagements per 10 minutes. Same thing in Hardpoint. So somehow Kenny's playing at a, maybe not a faster pace, because it might just depend on what routes he's taking. He might just be like, I mean, he's going to new at like 50 seconds left on Skid Row. But it might just be the routes he's taking. But Kenny somehow, with the most engagements per 10 minutes and Hardpoint on the team, is definitely unexpected when you have Shotzzy and Pred on your team. But it's working for them. So I think they just got to keep doing what they're doing. Keep, watching VOD and learning from their mistakes and learning from what other teams are doing. And I think as this season goes on, they're honestly only going to get better. Now let's touch on LAG, because LAG honestly is a surprising team to start the season. Obviously, they got 3-1'd by Ultra. Didn't really look too great in this series. Then they lost in Game 5 versus the Subliners. Even though they lost 3-2, they honestly looked like they had an opportunity to win all 5 maps they played in that series. And then they won the Battle of LA by 3-0ing by LA Thieves, which was an absolutely abysmal performance from the Thieves, but a really great performance out of the LAG team. And if we look at their stats, this team is in a very interesting place because honestly, they look like they could be a solid top 8, maybe even try to push for top 6 type team, at least right now to start the season. Fame is definitely the one that's been struggling the most, especially in Respawn. As you can see in Hardpoint, he's got a 0.9. in control. He's got a 0.82. Yesterday, he looked really good, to be fair. But he's definitely the one struggling when it comes to the respawn. If he can pick it up, he can get closer to a 1.0 KD, kind of like how Estriel's doing here, as you can see on screen. I think they're going to be great. This is another team that is playing at a rapid pace, all with over 40 engagements. Fame playing at the fastest pace, so him having the lowest KD is understandable. This team, honestly, very, very surprising to see how good they're doing. Diamond Khan has looked like a top AR in the game, honestly, which is really surprising. And then Assault has looked really good. Estriel and Fame, like I said, have shown some promise here and there. Honestly, I'm going to say it. I think this LAG team has a chance to make winner's bracket at the major if they can kind of keep this performance up. And then maybe, just maybe, they can make a run at the major and sort of, find themselves in maybe a top 8 situation at Major 1, which would definitely be a dub considering what they were expected to start the season. And then, as you can see here from Brian's stats, I'll zoom in real quick. LA Gorillas are 6-1 all-time against LA Thieves. So the Battle of LA, honestly, isn't really that crazy. I don't know why LA Thieves is worse than LAG, or at least when it comes to head-to-head, because I would say just about every year, LA Thieves has had the better team and has had the better season overall. But whatever it is, I'm just going to start taking LAG over my boys LA Thieves whenever they play. And then the last team I want to talk about is the Boston Breach, because they did 3-0 a top 4 team. Boston was the first non-top 4 team to be a top 4 team this season. Top 4 being Ultra Phase, OpTic, and Subliners, of course. And they looked crazy in this series. Ultra honestly just had a down series. Not going to rag on Envoy too much. He's been getting it enough, but he did put up a 0.48 on the series. So maybe something was up with him, but I doubt we see him play like this again. But to talk about the Breach team, this is what I was expecting from a Breach team when we saw what they were going to be on paper heading into the season. Snoopy is playing lights out. I mean, 75 kills through 3 maps is crazy. They would have had it if this was a 5-game series. They would have had another hard point. So you're looking at probably 20 to 30 kills depending on the map. And then you're looking at another search and destroy where in map 2, I mean, he put up 9 kills. So even if you only put up 5, you're probably looking at a series kill record out of Snoopy for this series if it went 5. Just playing absolutely out of his mind. Capsule has been an amazing playmaker for this team. The dude is doing so much. Sometimes he's the only SMG on the team. Sometimes you see Snoopy with an AR. And Capsule is just making it work, especially in control. The dude is playing really, really well and just making plays, which is just really great. He's the guy who gets in your spawn when they play on high-rise control and holds you in there. The dude's playing incredible. So major shout out to Capsule. He's not getting enough love, in my opinion. Priesta just showed why he's so good against Ultra, I guess. I don't know why he's so good against them, but he just is. And then Slasher, I mean, just, Slasher doing Slasher things, hopefully probably helping his team regain with his leadership. This Breach team, I think, has a capability to bounce back big time and maybe make a run to try and get winner's bracket at their home major at Major 1. Look at the stats. They're struggling in hardpoint. I mean, there's nothing much else you can be said. Apparently, they're 3-3 in hardpoint, if this is correct. But they obviously got to get their slaying numbers up. In SND, the SMGs are just going absolutely crazy. And then Slasher and Priesta are kind of getting crapped on, which you're definitely going to want to see that switch around. If they can get back to what we can expect from them in SND, this team is going to be really good. And then in control, Slasher and Snoopy. I mean, Snoopy, as you can see here, the only one above a 1 in all the game modes. The dude is looking really, really good. Probably #1 rookie of the year right now after 2 weeks, but I will be posting my rookie of the year ladder on Twitter tomorrow on Tuesday. This team just overall, they showed what they're capable of against this Ultra team in this series. And I'm excited to watch them play after the break. And now let's end it off by looking at the stats here. As you can see here, Slayer rating, you're going to notice it's all SMGs because they're, picking up the most damage, picking up the pace. Kleenex far and away the highest, which I think is interesting, but followed up by Snoopy, by Metals. So 2 newer guys in the league, which is really cool to see. And then KD-wise, who else other than Celium? We're not talking about him enough, honestly, because we've been talking about how good Simp has been, who is obviously tied with him. But Celium right up there, of course. Metals, Pred, and Dashy. So we got 2 Phase, 2 OpTic, 1 Mutineers, 1 Heretics player in the top 4 KD. I mean, these guys are all looking great. But yeah, that is my chill little recap of kind of some of the things we saw from week 2. Honestly, I'm really excited to see what happens. I'm upset that we have a 3-week break. We're literally not going to have matches until January 12th. So 3 weeks from now, which is a long, long time. So I'm still going to be putting out content though. So if you want to see more CDL content, make sure to sub. Like 98% of people who watch my content are not subbed to the channel. So if you would consider subscribing, that would be absolutely amazing. I would very much appreciate the support. And yeah, with all that being said, hopefully I'll see you all in the next video.